Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. For many years, my friend Sara Bennett was a public defender and later a pro bono attorney, appealing wrongful convictions and defending battered women. But she's also a talented photographer. And though she's still working with the women who are or have been in prison, it's now in a different way. She's just finished, and I have to say to much acclaim, her third collection of photo essays. This time it's of women still incarcerated. So welcome.
Hi, Ronnie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. What made you think that you could, it's great to have you.
Thanks.
What made you think of this project, of the way of doing the women?
The newest one?
No, all of them.
All of them. I don't know. It was, the very first one was just one of those brainstorms that you get every so often. And that's, you know, I was representing Judy Clark,
right.
And I was trying to figure out how to humanize her. And it was just like something that was on my mind all the time. And one day I just thought, I don't know, I'm going to photograph women who've been incarcerated with her. I kept on meeting people who had been incarcerated with her. They kept on telling me what an amazing person she was. And I thought, what if I just, you know, photograph them, because they all are like so beautiful and attractive and everything, and ask them what Judy meant to them. And so I did that. And it was just pure advocacy. And I was not a photographer. My husband's a photographer. And I used his camera, and he actually came with me on some of the shoots. And there was such an amazing response to that work. That's really what got me on doing photography.
It's so interesting because, I mean, that's how we met over Judy Clark.
Right.
And we'd go up to the prison quite, and I've been to the prison quite a few times visiting. Something happens when you're there and you get to know the women. I mean, I always felt, anyway, such precarious existences that I could be there for some reason. So I always had the feeling you wanted to show people, right, what these women were like. I mean, they're human beings.
Right.
And people don't know that.
Exactly. I mean, honestly, it was the reaction to that book that I did about Judy. It kind of surprised me. Like, I would show people the images. I'll show you a couple. And people would look at it, and, you know, there would be somebody, you know, somebody with their children, and people would say, oh, she was in prison? What was she in prison for? She looked so normal. She looked so, and I thought, people don't really know. And what happens is we send people to prison, and then we never think about them ever again. And so I guess I wanted to provide a face to people who have been sent away, so that people would think about, why do we treat people like that? So that's kind of what sent me down that photography road. And of course, now here we are, it's 6 years later, and I just finished my third project, and so I've become, you know, I know more about a camera now. Obviously, I don't have to take my husband with me anymore on my photo shoots.
So the second one was Life After Prison.
Life in Prison. And the second one, or was really the first one, that was a response to this. I followed 4 women in their reentry process. And, you know, I just documented them as they went about their daily living, just as a way of showing like some of the problems with reentry and how difficult it is to find a job or housing, reconnect with family, and how the women did it with such spirit. So that was the second one. And then the third one was I photographed formerly incarcerated women in their bedrooms. But I always, if you ever read my artist statement, every single one, I always say that, I don't use the word stand-in, but basically I was saying the women are representative of the women that they left behind. And so this newest series of mine is really the one that I've been wanting to do forever. So,
which is what?
Oh, photographing women serving life sentences inside prison, because I wanted to bring to life people who are inside prison.
And anybody who's been there, and I was there, it started when I worked for Mario Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, so I really got to know these women. You realize their stories, and you realize what they've gone through, both outside of prison and then once inside with all the time to think and everything else. Why are they still there, right? And that was, I think, what we came away from looking at this. Tell us about these women.
It's funny because I didn't know most of them really at all. I sort of sent out a call to a bunch of women in prison and said, this is who I am, and I would like to come and do this series. This is my earlier work. Would you be interested? If you are, I will come and visit you. And so I went and I visited the 20 women that I ended up photographing, and we sat and we talked, and then I got permission to photograph them, and then I went back and photographed them. So really it was like I had 2 interactions with them. But what's happened since is that because this work has been getting some press attention and I have exhibitions and things like that, I'm always letting them know your work was in the Times, or I just had this big exhibition at Photoville and this many people saw your work, you know, saw you. It's like I'm developing a relationship with many of the women because now they're writing me, and so I feel like I'm getting to know them better.
And are you also developing their following that's going to lead to requests for clemency and also for different verdicts from the parole board?
You know, I try to keep it separate. You know, I try to keep my lawyering very separate from it because I don't want there to be any expectations that I'm going to be able to. I mean, I'm a photographer to them, you know. I
know that.
Yeah.
I
mean, do I hope that
the people that see it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point, is to bring these problems to the public. Right. And the nice thing about photography is that, you know, they always say a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? It's very true. And so people see these images and they have a response to them. And hopefully, and then they learn a little bit more about the criminal justice system, and then you hope that that's going to lead to some kind of change. It's,
I mean, we know the work it took for Judy Clark. 2 steps, right? Mm-hmm. First, because she was sentenced to 75 years to life, we had to get that to make her eligible. You had to get it to make her eligible for parole. And then we had to build the support. And that wouldn't have happened without a lot of strategizing and support.
Absolutely.
Right? And I saw the other night on television a woman down south, I forget where, who was just gotten out of prison because she had a lot of famous Hollywood people or something. Now, everybody can't do that.
No, everybody can't do that. So the idea is to
tell
just
people
to make
what's going on.
To make people think. I mean, I can show you.
Let's talk about some of the people.
Yeah, like, well, the woman who I put on the cover of my book. So one of the things that I've sort of perfected in my photography is having the women, I ask them all a question. In this case, I just said, this is your opportunity to say something to the outside world. What do you want to say? And then they all sent me handwritten statements. And so there's so much. And can I read what?
Yeah, sure, please.
So this is Linda. She's 70. She's been in prison for 27 years. She's not eligible for parole for 3 more years. And you know,
because you have to have served, why?
Because her sentence is 30 years to life, and you have to serve 30.
And you have to, so when is she eligible?
At 30. At 30 years, she's eligible for parole.
Unless she got, what do you call it, a clemency or a part?
Yeah, if she had, I mean, if she had gotten clemency, I don't even know if she ever applied for clemency.
If she got clemency, then her term would have been reduced, so she was eligible to go to the parole board. Yeah. So
this is what she said, and one of the reasons I put her on the cover for 2 reasons. One, because she's elderly, and 2, because I love what she had to say. So she says, "This is my 27th year being incarcerated. I've been scared, lonely, hurt, disappointed, and forgotten. When I got here 11 months ago, I couldn't believe all the women I had done time with were still here, going to board after board and never getting out. Will that happen to me? I do my hair and makeup every day. It makes me feel good. But on the inside, I'm breaking down. To name a few, I had a triple bypass, 2 strokes, major back surgery, and I take 30 pills a day. The bottom line is, I beg for forgiveness and a second chance. Will I ever see my freedom? Will I die behind these walls?" I mean, it's just, every time I read it, it gives me the chills. And when she says, I got here 11 months ago, so she was at Bedford Hills, which is the maximum security. When you get closer to your parole date, you get sent either to Taconic or to Albion. So when she says, when I got here 11 months ago, I couldn't believe all the women I had done time with were still going to board after board. So she got to Taconic and she saw women who had left Bedford 10 years earlier.
Because they were going to the board.
And they had been denied parole 5 times. So there was somebody like, let me see where I can find her in here, Elizabeth, a chef who had a sentence of 20 years to life. When I met her, she was going to her 5th board. So she had been denied 4 times already. She had served 30 years.
And you can only go to the board every other year.
Actually, I think she had been denied 5 times because she was
there for 10 years. Yeah.
And so she basically ran the kitchen at Taconic. That's what she did. But so when Linda got there and she sees Elizabeth, her feeling is, I thought Elizabeth must have been gone years ago. Is this going to happen to me? So there's a lot of that despair and, you know, and it's not that people who have been in prison for years and years and years, I mean, we've talked about this so many times, they have a really stellar record. They run the prison. Right. You know, they're completely transformed individuals.
What's the woman who runs the kitchen? What does she say?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
So Elizabeth actually did get out after I photographed her, and then she was deported to Haiti. So it didn't make any sense. I mean, just think about the taxpayer dollars. Just if you think of it in terms, economic terms, like we housed her for an extra 10 years. She says, I look at others who have been to multiple parole boards like me, and they've lost hope and don't see the light. I wonder when I will lose hope. When will I stop seeing that light? That's my biggest fear. My dream is to feed people with food made with love. I will give back to my society and will never stop growing. So she hadn't actually lost her hope. She was not deep in despair.
It's really shocking, and the reasons most often given are the original crime.
Right, exactly.
It's not what's happened to you since you came here.
No, not
in the 20 years you've been here or the 25 years you've been here.
Not at all.
It's tell us about your crime. Is that the first question?
Yeah, it's always the first question. What did you do? And there's nothing you can say. I did it. I did it. But now here we are 30 years later. I'm more than that.
And you can't say, I don't think, I didn't do it. I've been falsely accused.
Well, I think if you didn't do it, you can say you didn't do it. I have taken people to the parole board who were innocent before.
But don't they then say, well, you haven't, I mean, how does that figure into
well, it's very difficult.
The character? They want to hear the remorse.
Right. It's very difficult. You know? I mean, sometimes people say, I shouldn't have been in that place, or I made bad choices in my company or something, you know, it's very difficult when somebody's innocent.
Yeah.
I want to show you the one that got to me. I mean, so many of them got to me, Ronnie. So many of them got to me. But when I met this girl, Tiana, so she was sentenced at 15, at the age of 15, to 15 years to life.
For 50?
15.
Years to life?
At the age of 15.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. I actually came back and I actually had to call one of my friends who's head of the Juvenile Rights Division in Legal Aid and said, I didn't know that 15 to life was the max for a child. I had thought it was 9 to life, which is bad enough. But this is, I mean, we know so much about the juvenile brain and everything. And so you see somebody like this, so she was 15, now she's 25. She's almost ready to go to the parole board. I guess she's got 5 more years. It's just such a...
It just is so senseless.
It's terrible. It's
and that's
heartbreaking.
So interesting because you have conservatives who are astonished at the cost of it, and then other people who show the cost is a waste, but basically can't believe that we're doing this to people, right? And the recidivism rate is very low of people who spent a long time.
Very low, very low. For long-termers, I don't know what it is. It's less than 1%.
And it's the same for men. I mean, it's almost worse, I guess, So what do we do? Who's on the parole board? Well, it starts with sentencing, doesn't it?
In the years that I've been here, though, I feel like we're making some headway in terms of thinking about mass incarceration. You know, when I was working on Judy's case 10 years ago, people were not talking about it. People were not talking about over-sentencing. Then there was sort of a release of the low-level drug offenders, and then so the doors of prisons opened to
and it was a political concept too, that of the population that is incarcerated. It's mostly people of color.
So there has been a shift, somewhat of a shift, and so in the last few years, we're starting to see people get paroled a little more often than we did. We're seeing a few more clemencies than we've seen. But still, like if somebody gets sentenced tomorrow for a crime, they're still going to give them the max, 25 to life or life without parole or whatever it is that they want to do without taking all of this stuff that we've learned. And so, you know, I always think like the one side doesn't know what the other is doing. It's just...
It is.
You know, it's...
And who are the people who are on the parole board?
Well, you know, those are basically political appointees, right?
Because they really need to have some expertise in approaching a question. It's a life or death question for people.
You know, I mean, one of the things that I've seen recently that I like is, you know, the DA Eric Gonzalez, his office. Have you heard about some of his
I have. Tell me.
Changes?
Yeah.
Well, it used to be that when somebody came up for parole, the parole board would reach back out to the district attorney's office and they would just automatically, that was just routinely say, we're opposed to parole. And his office has now switched that. And I think that there's a presumption that they're going to support parole as opposed to a presumption that they're going to oppose it. So that's a shift. And that's a very good shift. But there's sort of like nothing happens. You go to prison and then 25 years later, you come back up for parole. And in those 25 years, nobody's talked to the victims, nobody's talked to the DAs, nobody's done anything. And then you come to the parole board, and now they might reach out to the victims and ask them what they think, even though nobody's talked to them for 25 years. Nobody's going to tell the victims, oh, the person has changed and this is what they've done. You know, I mean, the Kings County DA, and I think the Bronx DA also is now not opposing parole, but in the past they would have opposed it. So there's like no continuity within the system, or there's no sort of understanding that where you were in the past and where you are today are two different things, which is true for everybody.
And that goes back to what's the purpose of prison.
Exactly.
And what happened to rehabilitation.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is such an impersonal term anyway, right?
And so the women I met were I mean, I was pretty conscientious about what I was trying to show. And so originally I had a lot of women in like their late 30s and 40s, because those are women who had served probably 20 years already of their sentence. But I was looking for young women in particular. Yeah,
there's one young woman who has so many years ahead of her.
Well, there's actually 4 women in here who were sentenced under the age of 17. So when I met them, it was kind of heartbreaking, because it makes you think about the older women you meet, or you meet somebody who's 35 and they've done 20 years in prison already, and then you meet the woman who's the youngest woman in this photo essay is actually right now 21. So you try to look back and you say, oh, that was her 15 years ago, so young, you know?
And what is the young woman facing? How many years?
Well, the 4 young women I have, one has 25 years to life.
And how many years has she been in?
She's been in 6 years already, this woman here. This girl, I want to call her a girl, she went in at the age of 17. She has 25 years to life, and she's 23 right now. I mean, that's just sort of inconceivable, right? And even at 6 years in, I mean, these girls are very, I don't know, they're very articulate, they're very deep, you know, in a way that we don't see in, you know, young 20-somethings, because their life experience is so heavy.
I wanted to just say to people that, at least I didn't as a visitor, and I think a lot of people, I mean, you were an attorney, so it's a different story. You don't go around asking people what they did.
No, I didn't actually ask anybody what they did. I mean, it was clear that I wanted people who had life sentences, which means that they had all been convicted of homicide. That was a conscientious choice or decision on my part, because I wanted to show the, you know, the severity of the sentencing, and also there's the fact that you never know when you're going to get released. So that was conscientious. I also didn't say what people had done, other than that they're convicted of homicide. I didn't ask them the details of their crime, and I don't provide them. And sometimes people who see my work, they don't like that. They think I should you know, what about the victims, or I should say more about their crime. My response is I don't, you know, if you, I mean, for one, you never really know what somebody did. That's, I mean, I know that from my years of being an attorney. Like, you can read a record and it tells you one thing, or you can hear a, you know, a news report or whatever.
Yeah.
So but I just really didn't want to. I didn't want to get into the details. I mean, one of the really great things about this project, it was the first time I actually got to see what the prison looked like.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And so, you know, it was just a really different experience to be beyond the lawyer room or the visiting room and to see where people worked. And, you know, you see people working and then you ask them, how much do you get paid? Which, do you know how much they
28
get paid?
cents or something?
I mean, it's, the average is between 11 and 25 cents an hour.
So that goes into their account?
Yeah, but then they have to buy things with,
Right.
and the things still cost, you know. I mean, one person told me she works, I think she said she works 10 hours to buy some chicken, you know, to buy a pack of chicken.
You don't have to repay for in our state for your incarceration?
No. I suppose that's why you get paid so little, because that's apparently, you know, so
yeah.
I'm not sure.
And we're looking at, I mean, this is supposed to be this sophisticated country or this smart country. And, you know, the typical example, but in Europe and in Germany, when our criminal justice people go over there, it's astonishing to see the difference.
Well, I think people have a different idea. I think here it's really just punishment. That's really what it is. Whereas I think in the other countries, it's the idea is that you're going to go to prison. That's the punishment. And now you're going to learn how to re-enter society. And so people are treated like they live in regular housing and they wear their own clothes and they go out on furloughs. Because the idea is they're going to re-enter society. And the truth is they are pretty quickly. Unlike here, where you're not going to re-enter society for, on a homicide case, usually at least 25 years. So, you know, do you know they have email in prison now?
Do they really?
They have email.
Personal email?
They have email now. So they all were given tablets and they all have email. But it costs 25 cents to send an email. So remember we used to talk about how the phone calls were so expensive?
What do they now charge?
The phone calls are cheap. They're, you know, maybe 2 or 3 cents a minute.
What was it before? It was very expensive.
Oh, it used to be $1 something a minute. But now it's the email. So if somebody emails me and I email them back, and I'm going to pay for them to return their, the email costs 50 cents.
It's amazing.
It is.
You know, what we forget is, and what you're showing is the humanity of it.
Right.
And most of these people, if they're lucky, they have families, and the women have children. And the men also have children, and there are children without their mothers and children without their fathers. And what is this guy sitting in prison when he's 10 years after he's eligible for parole? I mean, it's really, you're right, it's all punishment and vindictiveness, right? Yeah. So what's your next project?
Oh, I'm not ready to say.
And you're never thinking of going back into law. I know you help people. You help lawyers.
Yes, I do. I like to mentor lawyers. Is what I would say. But no, you know, this is, to me, is it's a much more effective way of raising the issues. Like, I mean, I'm really lucky. My photography has been published in a lot of different places. And so like today it's on Insider. Do you know Insider? It's like a sister to business insider. I mean, those are not people who think about these issues, right?
Yeah.
And so photography is such a great way
to really show it. Now, we didn't even talk about your upcoming exhibit.
Oh, right.
And it happens to be connected to CUNY.
Yeah, yeah. It's going to be at CUNY Law School in Queens. It's opening on October 24th. There'll be a panel conversation with me. Judy will be there, and one of the other women I photographed. What I love about showing at CUNY Law School is they put the photos in the window facing out into the street.
Ooh.
And so that means, CUNY Law School in Queens is in a very busy hub at Court Square. And so people come by and they see, and if it's anything like the last time I could barely, I was in the middle of hanging photos and people were already looking. And I mean, I said this, but people come, they see the photos and they look. But because there's the women's handwriting, they stay and they read. And so I think that's something that it's sort of a formula I hit on, and that it works very well, and it gives the women their own voice.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's lifeafterlifeinprison.com.
All right. And so people should go to the exhibit. Obviously, it's in the windows. It's open for everybody.
Yeah, it's open for everybody. It's at 4:30. I think the panel conversation is from 5 till 6:30.
Very good.
On Thursday, October 24th.
Right. And the CUNY Law School has a clinic that works with women.
Yeah, it has a defender clinic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you,
looking
Ronnie.
forward to the next project that you won't tell me about.
Okay.